How does the House of Usher fall? We're going to be answering that question and many more on today's episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the Priests of the Geeks. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, here with two wonderful co-hosts. One, of course, you know him, you love him. He's your boy, Kevin Schaeffer. How's it going, Kevin?
Doing great, Christian. TJ, this is going to be a fun one, as
Oh,
always.
yes. And of course, how could we do another All Reading Counts episode without the one who invented language himself, the great showman, TJ Blackwell? How's it going, TJ?
It's going great. Thank you so much.
Oh, excellent. So, yes, like I mentioned, this is another All Reading Counts episode. We'll explain what that means in a little bit. Guys, what was the last short story or novella that you read?
Before this, or
Before this?
oh, it was probably something for all reading counts. Actually, I don't remember what order we read it in when we did like the big all reading counts episode where like we all chose a different short story.
Yeah.
One of
Okay.
those, Bradbury, perhaps.
Okay. Kevin, what about you?
I have one I want to highlight. Not the last one I read, but one it was like a few months ago. So Cord Jefferson, who is the director of the film American Fiction, which is an excellent movie if you've not seen. He's also a TV writer, but he published a story a couple years ago called The Front House, which is available on looking at the YaleReview.org. So look that up. That's one of the best short stories I've read in a while. It starts off seemingly like slice of life, like this guy who's trying to figure out like his next stage, and he's middle aged and he lost his job and he moves into this suburban neighborhood. And then it takes such a dark turn in the like second half, and it's a whirlwind, beautifully written. And I became really interested in Cord Jefferson's career after seeing American Fiction. He's been a journalist, short story writer, screenwriter. I think he said he's working on a play now. He's probably one of my favorite just artist voices right now. So yeah, The Front House, I highly recommend.
Okay. Yeah, I think after we did that last episode, I did remember we talked about The Mist at one point in time. I think that was one I was going to pick. And I reread it again because I just remembered the ending of the movie. And it's like, well, is it really better than a short story novella? It absolutely is. I mean, King himself said it. But still, that short story, there's plenty to gain from it, even if it is a very ambiguous ending, the bane of my existence. But yeah, I do really enjoy The Mist.
That's a good one too.
All right.
And I saw the movie first, and then yeah, that the movie is a memorable ending.
Very much so.
To put it lightly. Yeah.
Not for the faint of heart.
Not at all.
So, people listening, thank you very much. We're doing another one of our All Reading Counts episodes. This is something you can find as a link in the description from the ones we've done before, the ones we'll be doing in the future, as we continue to pile this on. If you would like to, please check out our website where you can purchase all of our All Reading Counts merch at our store, or make a one-time donation on Patreon so you can get the bonus episode, the bonus question we have for this. Just a one-time donation. Everything will be sent to our local public libraries. Thank you guys for everything that you do. We appreciate the donations. This is a very important thing that we're attempting to do. Just not be like, hey, look at us. Aren't we just so great? But like, no, like, guys, before we get any further, what does all reading counts mean to you? Why do you care about this?
I was an English major, so I feel like I should automatically say reading is important. But this is actually my first one of these episodes. But I mean, I love a lot of different mediums of storytelling, but there is something so special about reading a novel, a short story, nonfiction, and then to go and talk about it with people. There's nothing quite like it. I think it's such a I mean, we are increasingly becoming. Well, I mean, illiteracy is definitely a problem in the day, but even just like not just illiteracy, but people losing interest in it, or like, look, I mean, I even saw something the other day that like automatically simplifies text for you to make it more, and I'm like, that makes like that makes the English major in me cringe. Like, and so, but it's just such a like, and I mean, I don't say it in a judgy way. I just think like reading is so important, and it is so wonderful to discuss the highs and lows of something you just read, and like what you take away from a story. So that, and I'm very much like uh very opposed to the idea of like, oh, this is actual literature, this is not. I think that's like with all reading counts. Like, I mean, I think whether you're into graphic novels, you're into different genres, like absolutely there is merit in classic literature, and you should read that, but also read what you want. And like Neil Gaiman has a quote on that of like, read the books they say not to, just read it. It fills your soul.
TJ?
I feel like it's really easy to discredit someone's reading if they mostly read manga or comic books. But Christian, you of all people should know, if you read it like we read it, it's really a book a week.
Yes. With
Like,
as much as we read, as much we experience. Yeah.
How many like series we're keeping up with on a weekly basis?
20 to 30.
Constantly.
That's just manga. Yeah, comics, forget about that. I don't even know the number.
Yeah. And the number only grows. It doesn't ever get shorter.
Yeah.
Even
no matter how many
a series
you
does
finish. Yeah. It's not fair.
Yeah. And forget when you're picking up a new series.
Ugh. Yep.
It's like, well, I'm reading like 100 chapters of this, and then I'm going to catch up for the week.
I completely agree with my co-host here. As an English minor, creative writing major, that has done me absolutely nothing as far as jobs. But thank you for spending all those thousands of dollars, my college says. I look at an idea like this, all reading counts. And I'm sure there might be something if we actually came up with it, we'd say, I don't know if that counts. But the premise behind it being, if you're reading a manga, weekly or monthly, or if you're reading a short story of some writer no one's ever heard of before, like they're both as valid as if I'm reading the great classics of old or the more modern fiction or nonfiction of today. Like, even if you're just reading the bottom of a screen of a foreign subtitled film because you don't understand the other language, I would kind of consider that to be all reading counts because you're having to engage visually with that. So that's why we do this. Like, it is super important to be literate in a very literate society. And if you don't challenge yourself by hearing other ideas from other works of fiction and nonfiction or what have you, you're kind of not helping yourself. So that's why we do things. And today we are covering the short story, The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Gentlemen, what was your introduction to this short story?
So I had heard about it, growing up, being in English classes. It just kind of gets mentioned. I never had to do anything with it in school. And then I saw the trailer for the Netflix series, and I was like, that looks pretty good. I'm going to read it instead of watching it.
Okay. Good for you. Well, so if you go back, you can listen to an episode Christian and I did on the Netflix series, and I said there, I believe it or not, like even being an English major, I didn't have a huge Poe background. Obviously, you know who he is, but I maybe only read like short stories here and there. Oddly enough, yeah, not a lot in classes or anything. I don't know, and I promise I still read a lot of classic literature, but that's just, for whatever reason, we just didn't do that. And so I did not read the short story until this, and excited to talk about it. But I devoured the Netflix series, really loved it. We had a great discussion on that, and we'll probably continue some of that in this episode.
Yes. For me, I remember encountering this when I was in elementary school. I think it was one of those collections of Poe's short stories, one of the great illustrated classics they used to do. I don't know if they still do that. And if so, they need to, because that got a lot of kids into reading some very classic stuff back in the day. That's how I, read The Telltale Heart and The Raven and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this short story, obviously as a kid, I didn't get everything that was going on, but I still read it and enjoyed it. So, and I'll go ahead and answer this since it ties into my answer for this one. How were we introduced to Poe's works? Well, that same thing. Outside, I think maybe I had heard The Raven being read in class for poetry before that, but definitely those great illustrated classics were how I read a lot of things back in the day. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Poe's works. That's how I was introduced to a lot of these things. How about you guys?
Yeah, for sure. Just throughout the years, The Raven, Telltale Heart are just in a lot of my like high school and middle school English textbooks. He's ever present. It's like he's been my teacher before.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even if you haven't read like all of them, like his influence is just there in every, especially every short story you read in English and creative writing classes. And I mean, as early as middle school, I took like classes on folklore and stuff like that, and had short stories and books read aloud. And then, yeah, I mean, I did creative writing and film classes throughout college. So yeah, showed up plenty throughout the years, but I just never did like a super deep dive. But I do love just, I mean, I was just at Barnes Noble, and I really love those. Like Christian, that you were just talking about the classic illustrated editions there. They're just gorgeous to look at.
Oh, yes. All right. So let's get into this bad boy. Who would like to describe the plot of this short story?
Please, Kevin.
Pretty minimal. I mean, really, an unnamed narrator. It's from his perspective. He is going to visit the house of Roderick Usher, and Roderick's sister Madeline also lives there. And the narrator talks about how he grew up with this man, that they were friends, and now Roderick is at the end of his life. Madeline also dies about midway through toward the end of the story. And then the fall of the house is a literal, the house comes crashing down toward the end. There's this whole supernatural element. And yeah, we really, I mean, it's plot wise, there is not a lot to say here. That's why I was actually fascinated by, I knew, like, I mean, we'll get into the more like how the show adapted, but I was kind of amazed at how minimalist the plot was here. And yeah, you never really, I mean, even though the narrator describes like growing up with Roderick, and Roderick is obviously is this influential figure, you still don't get a lot of details beyond that. It's pretty much just like they knew each other growing up, and now he sees him here at the end of his life, and there are horrors within this house.
At least one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those. It's not big on plot outside of the fact that there's a story here, but it's more setting and mood and dialogue that build our characters than any like, hey, a giant meteor just crashed outside. Let's go investigate, gang, or anything like that. It's like, how did they get to the point where not only are they crumbling as a family, but so is their house? And it's explored extremely well in a short amount of time. Yeah, we call them short stories. Some short stories really stretch the definition of that, but this one gives you what you need. There's very little else I would add to this, if even anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just Poe does such a good job with, I forgot the word, explanatory language, creative language. And it's
descriptive.
It's great.
Like,
it's descriptive writing, and it's so good. It's so easy to imagine what Poe had in his mind when he was writing this. And just as a side note, he definitely killed people, right?
Poe himself?
Like, I'm not, yeah, like I don't think we need to pretend that he didn't really. The Telltale, like he killed somebody.
So that's your conspiracy theory. That's how he's got his insider knowledge.
Yeah, I don't even think it should be a conspiracy theory. There's just no way he didn't.
No, he
He
did
does
die under very
describe
mysterious
the details
circumstances.
very well. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
People coming back for revenge. Who knows?
But yeah, no,
Uh,
he really only needs 12 pages to tell a story that is fantastic. It's engaging.
Yeah. And that that is I would say short stories are in many ways the hardest form of fiction to write, because you do have to, and I mean some short stories are longer, but still you have to, really be concise and decide what kind of story you're going to tell in a shorter amount of time. And absolutely, he just nails it, with that part. And it is so, like, even with minimal details, like you said, TJ, you don't need all that to be immersed here and to have all the atmosphere, and the characterization there.
Yeah, it really is just a absolute showcase.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have learned in my own writing to never write short stories because they inevitably become novels. And
Yeah.
I have too many that I'm never going to end up finishing in this life unless I get like some very rich donor out there, some patron who's willing to let me do whatever I want. It's not going to happen. So, no short stories for this guy. But yeah, I can definitely appreciate someone who's able to curb their
Mm-hmm.
instincts and actually
Yeah.
commit to the bit like Poe does most of the time. So yeah, this story is phenomenal in that respect. And I think Kevin, you actually mentioned this does have an unnamed narrator for
Yeah.
this story, and that's been a question. Obviously, people ask, like, well, why do you think Poe went with an unnamed narrator for this story?
From
Uh,
Go ahead, DJ.
no, you please. I was just gonna say I don't know what that normally means in literature.
I don't know if I like if it does, but I think at least my takeaway is that it helps you put like the reader be put right in the shoes there, and like be innocent, because by being unnamed, like it puts you, and being from the narrator's point of view, it puts the reader directly there. So like you're almost like following this world and entering the House of Usher with the narrator like you are them. So I think it just it's a universal thing that, makes it really accessible to the reader that way.
Yeah,
That's my take, but yeah.
yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I take it from like the silent protagonist angle for video
Mhm,
games.
mhm.
It's sort of the
Yeah, yeah,
same thing.
Mm,
yeah, yeah,
Like you want to project yourself into that role, or
yeah.
that's what is intended, and it's effective. It works great.
yeah. Now, I don't know if there's an actual answer. I was just kind of curious myself, and I agree with you guys. I think if this is the reason, it's probably to place the reader into the shoes of the narrator as you're going up to this creepy house and you be like, everyone, has friends they need to catch up with. Maybe not under these circumstances, but you can kind of get in those shoes for a little bit. Oh, I'm gonna go see Bob or whatever. It's been too long. And then you get to their place and you start hearing these creaks and these groans and what maybe wailing or something like that, and things are wrong. Everyone's at some point in time been to someone else's house and something has gone wrong or something seems a little off, and it could have been something completely and utterly innocent, but because you're in a separate spot from where you normally are, your senses are a little more heightened. In a story like this, it really puts you in that place of what is going on. I'm feeling unwell listening and reading this story, hearing what's going on, hearing is she still alive? What's going on? What's is there actually a curse on this family? And then being put in those shoes, I'm fairly certain that's what he meant. But to be perfectly honest, I didn't like look out for this actual answer to see if there was one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reader interpretation, and there is no right answer there.
Yeah. So part of this story is that our unnamed narrator is catching up with an old friend, Roderick Usher. He is the last scion of the Usher family in this vaguely New England kind of setting that most of Poe's stories end up in, where they come from old money, but economic decisions were made or people made the wrong deals. And it just seems like the house and the family have both lost pretty much everything, including what appears to be Roderick's mind as well. Like as he kind of slips into madness over the story and has been in the throes of it before we even see him. Like, how do you guys? What do you think about how his madness is portrayed in this story?
I think it definitely does the job. I'm like, as far as like a specific prognosis, I don't know, but it communicates well that like this is a man who's unwell, possibly at the end of his life. Not a comfortable place to be. You're just trying to make it comfortable for him. Also, our main character, us, it might be insane too, because he's here for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He's here
You
for
kind of forget
weeks.
that.
That's a really good point because when you read it first, you think it's like just in a night or whatever, but it is and it raises so many questions like why does he stay there that long? What is there? There's a lot, and I don't know. I think that's a strength of the story is that it asks those questions without giving all the answers, and you don't really know if Roderick's state of being is self-inflicted or you gather there was something that happened and that and that he is an influential figure and maybe he went power hungry. That's obviously the direction the show went with. But I like that it leaves it open. But it conveys the eeriness so well.
Yeah, because like it really preys on compassion. Because you get a letter from an old friend and like, hey, I'm gonna die soon. I'd like it if you were there. And then 3 weeks later, he's not dead. Guess I'm just hanging around until it happens.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take care of my old friend.
What an age when you can just drop everything for 3 straight weeks and not have to worry about money.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this. He's got this whole idea, Roderick, that everything is crumbling around him. It's a pathological thought that he can't get rid of. That as soon as his sister dies for good, she is not feeling well herself, and as soon as he dies, like the entire house, all their legacy is just going to crumble, quite literally. And that's literally what happens at the end. So, like, is there something supernatural behind the madness? Is it something that he control? Is it genetic? Is it the result of potential incest, which some commentators have said might be what's going on here? And I forgot to add that as part of the questions, but we can get that to
I
that in
thought
a
about
second. But
that
like,
too.
as far as go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I just that thought also crossed my mind because like it had been a minute since I watched the series, and like when you first hear like Lady Madam, you just assume wait, and then it's like oh sister, but there's could be something going on here, or at least they were. Were in some kind of cahoots together, or they did something, and so I like the also it leaves a lot of that unanswered, but it certainly lends itself to speculation.
What do you think about that, TJ?
Oh no, it's the kind of thing that was more common back then, especially secluded. It's definitely possible, but this, it's described as a house of some renown, at least, not necessarily an influential one, but it is the House of Usher. They are known as the House of Usher. The family's not large, which they say outright, which could imply that they're not propagating correctly, like royal houses of old. So it's definitely not a dead theory.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a line there. I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's something about how most Usher children, if not all, are born as twins, normally a boy and a girl. And that keeps happening through the generations. And we know this now in genetics. If I remember correctly, if you're a twin, your chances of having twins are heightened, if I remember correctly. So obviously they didn't know that. That might have been speculation on Poe's part. But as far as science is concerned, that's something that happens more often. So lucky guess on his part, who knows? So I like that as an idea. I don't know if I'm 100% behind it, but there's just enough speculation in there where it's like, okay, you can reach your own conclusions here one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not something that definitively needs to be stated, especially considering when this was printed. Yeah, yeah, there's some Gothic literature going on here. There's, old families and stuff like that, and of course, they know all about the incest going on through the royal families, and you've got the old stories of the Habsburgs as well. So people know, hey, this isn't something we're supposed to do, and yet it seems like richer folk tend to do it so that they keep the money within their richer sphere of influence. So I can get behind that idea. I'm not ready to take the plunge yet.
No, that's fair. I just, it was more, like I said, just speculation. I wondered that, but there's a lot. I wonder in this story, there's a lot of questions you come away with.
Yeah. And one of the things for Roderick specifically that some people have speculated maybe this is what he's dealing with is something called, God help me, hyperesthesia. I think I said that right. And this is like a heightened sense of your senses, as in the way you hear things, the way you touch things, the way you taste things, so on and so forth, is just beyond normal to where you hear things other people won't, or you think you hear things that other people aren't going to hear. And it causes immense stress because your body's not really built for that. So there's some speculation that might be what's happening with him. It could be maybe that's one thing Poe was trying to hint towards incest as well, as that, genetic disorders. Obviously, they didn't have that term back in the day, but they knew, oh, well, if you keep inbreeding, bad things start happening in the bloodline. So maybe this was a way of hinting at that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
Poe writes with subtlety,
hmm hmm
and by subtlety I mean ambiguity mostly. I think he just got a real kick out of not answering questions. So it's up to us.
Okay.
I
Kevin?
agree. Oh, I agree. I think it just raises a lot of questions, but that particular diagnosis you said that would make sense. I mean, there's no way to say definitively, but yeah, when looking at stories like this, you look at the context, the setting, things of the time that would match, and that certainly fits here as a possibility.
Yeah, and Roderick is not the only person suffering from this. We also have Madeline,
Right.
who has some other thing. One thing that some people have brought up is she might have what happens to her is something called catalepsy, which is a very big neurological condition where you end up just in a trance, just staring off into space. Or sometimes the more bad ones, you get seizures that cause you to lose sensation
Okay.
and your consciousness to the point where you're just basically lying down and people assume you're dead. And this is a time too when very popular stories are being told of, the bell ringing that was left on someone's finger or foot in the grave, just in case, they were buried alive or something like that. So yeah, it increases the creep factor as well to look at their
Yes.
madness in these their minds as well as their bodies failing them,
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
house too.
Yeah, and like
And
speaking of just
oh, go
because
ahead. Yeah.
yeah, just because you brought it up, foreshadowing in a 12-page
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's really impressive, and I do
That,
love the
Yeah.
parallel there of the house
Mhm.
literally falling in conjunction with Roderick and Madeline.
Yeah,
And
and
it's just the imagery is so well described.
yeah, and it's one thing that I noticed. The way the story is built, it meets itself in the middle, and it's parallel until then. So I need to
Hmm.
like reread it and like nail
Mm,
it down
yeah.
because I just kind of
Yes.
like picked up on it, like thinking back on it. Like one of the first lines is, "There's a giant crack in this house." One of the last lines is, "The house is swallowed by the lake." And then Madeline's introduction compared to Madeline's death, Roderick's introduction, Roderick's death.
I see it. I see it. Okay, well, now we kind of brought it up too. Like one of the major descriptors here is our setting
Mhm.
for this story. Like, is there anything that particularly stands out about how this is used to set the mood and everything?
I would need to go back and look at for specific descriptions, but absolutely, that was one of the things my creative writing professor always emphasized was like, you guys need to make your setting a character. Like you can't it's boring if like you're just focused on character and plot. Like make it so that your characters feel like they are in a real place and it lives and that really stuck with me. And this is a great example of that where the house does feel like its own character, and it has the descriptions, the imagery, all the details that really bring it to life. That's what makes it so compelling. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I was terrible at, as I was probably calling me out in those classes, but because I can write dialogue pretty well and do characters, but it is hard to make your setting really feel lived in. And
I
Poe
agree.
is one of the greats at that.
Yeah,
I too suck at that.
One thing Poe does extremely well, not just here, but especially here, is the words that he uses to describe Usher, Roderick. He also uses to describe Usher, the house. Sickly, frail, gloomy, dark, depressed. He doesn't say depressing, but it is depressing.
Yeah.
And it is really effective at making you feel like this house is one of the 4 characters in this story.
Oh yeah. I mean, just from the very beginning, we get like I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after dream of the reveler upon opium. The bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. I could continue, but it's more, it's different words for pretty much this place is creepy. It's not the place you want to go. And it's done so well. Like that was one sentence. And as a man who loves writing run-on sentences, I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Whole churchgoers. You know what's up. Big fan of those.
Yeah. Anything else for the setting?
No, it just makes me envious of writers who can do that.
I agree.
Oh yeah. See,
All right.
I get to cheat. All of my creative writing is tabletop role playing game, so I get to use music.
Ah, yeah.
Tabletop role
Artists
playing is.
immensely.
I play a Star Wars RPG, and it is a great exercise in creative writing and
The
storytelling.
official one, or
Yeah, like the Age of Rebellion. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So one thing we mentioned several times is that, hey, this was recently adapted in certain ways into a Netflix series. So Kevin and I both watched it. We had an episode on it. TJ, I don't know if you would. Okay. So Kevin, this is for us. For anyone who didn't catch that YouTube only video, like, what are your thoughts on the show versus the book? Because obviously not all the stories adapted for the show were follow the House of Usher, but this was a huge influence given the title.
Sure. I mean, I said it in the episode. I loved the show. It's probably like my second or third favorite Mike Flanagan series. It's hard to choose between it's like Midnight Mass, that, and then Hunting of Hill House are all excellent. And so what he does with the series is basically takes the concept of House of Usher and then the concepts of other Poe stories and kind of uses those as inspiration for each episode. So the show tells the story of the Usher family, which is it's almost like Succession meets horror. Like you watch this like horrible, rich, elite family that are just like all pretty detestable. And in each episode, watching their downfall. And as far as how this story is adapted in the present day, the detective played by Carl Lumbly is meeting with Roderick Usher at the end of his life, and Roderick is recounting the story of both his life and how all of his children died and because of a deal he made with the demonic figure. and it's brilliantly executed. I said in that episode I could watch an entire movie or series of just Carl Lumbly and Bruce Greenwood talking, and it would be enough. And like, and there is a lot of it in the show, and it never disappoints. They're two just thespians. But it's a really, so that was really how Mike Flanagan approached the series. He created the narrative, the characters, and everything, but just took like the concepts from different Poe short stories and adapted them that way. So it's a really unique adaptation in that way.
Yeah, Dupont kind of shows up as for this story, he's the unnamed narrator.
Right.
And serves that purpose to allow Roderick to explain what's going on. How did we end up here?
Mm-hmm.
And since they take inspiration from a lot of more Poe stories, obviously they're not going to be what happens in this specific story, but we still get the relationship between him and Madeline and how everything in their family has been tied to their success, and now suddenly that's gone. I really appreciate that. And remind me, does it end with the house falling down?
Yeah, and I like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's still that same bookend.
Callback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's one of those, like, you don't need to have read the short stories to appreciate what's going on, but it definitely heightens your awareness of what they're calling to.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I kind of brought it up too, since it'd be something that's on most people's minds fairly recently. This came out just last year. And as well, I wanted to ask you guys the question, like, what are your opinions on how to adapt a story to film or television? Because we've seen some bad ones, we've seen some really good ones. I would call this one a really good one. So, like, how is that possible?
Well, thank God it's not my job to do that.
Okay.
TJ, I agree. I would not want to adapt even some of my favorite works. But so there's different approaches. There are quote unquote like faithful adaptations where it really, like, if you're adapting a novel into a film or series and you stay very true to the plot and you're really to the author's vision, and generally those can be really good. I also am not opposed to adaptations that drift from the source material, and that that are the creator's vision. You can have good and bad examples of both those approaches. I think ultimately, to adaptation, you just have to put the story first and tell a good story, and that's where if you do it well, I think you can be allowed to change things. I mean, you brought up The Mist earlier. I mean, there's one where it is faithful to the concept of the story, and so that's everything else, but it drastically changes the ending, and in a amazing way. Like you said, Stephen King said this is better than like what I had. One of the few where that's true, and that is a great example of like, yeah, you can. Frank Darabont had this amazing idea, and it served the film, and it worked it so well there. So I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think what's important is staying true to the spirit of the source material, which this show absolutely does. The Poe's DNA is all across the series, and the concepts are there. Like I said, Mike Flanagan has created his own narrative, his own characters, but all of the imagery, the concepts, and the world building stemmed from Poe.
Yeah. For this one especially, I'm super into what they do, because they upfront said these are not direct adaptations of the actual stories. We are inspired by them to create an original story based off of the originals. So with that knowledge, I come in, okay, let's see what they're going to do, versus if you're incredibly deceptive. And I'm not a big fans of the stories themselves, but the original The Witcher novels and short stories compared to the Netflix adaptation are completely and 100% off base, because they wanted to tell their own original story using pre-established characters, so they knew they would make money that way. Same thing with like the Halo TV series, based off of the video game. It is a complete and utter travesty and has nothing to do pretty much outside of names with the original story. There's no respect for the source material. It's I'm telling my story, and I'm telling my story based on your work, just so I can get my story out there and make my money,
Right.
versus respecting what came before. And Flanagan respects these stories.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many references to them that if you know the stories, you're going, oh man, that's a reference to this. I'm rewarded as a reader and a viewer with that. Versus, I'm going to take my helmet off every 5 seconds, Mr. Master Chief, and then let's make Yennefer way more of a shrew than she is. She is a shrew in the stories, but even way more of that to where she's completely unlikable. I can't stand when people do that. So yeah, this is an example of how to do it right when you're not directly adapting things.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Totally
sounds
agree.
like I haven't seen this series. I should probably watch it. It sounds like, but it really sounds like I know a few properties that could learn from Mike Flanagan's Follow the House of Usher.
Yes.
I'm thinking
Absolutely.
specifically
All right.
like any Junji Ito adaptation.
Ooh, I'm scared about the Uzumaki one.
I would be too
Yeah,
if they did it right.
I,
Right?
I, I'm hoping they do it right, but who knows? So,
They won't.
guys, anything you want to add about this particular short story before we head to the wrap up?
I think this could have been a couple of 100 pages longer. It would have been just as good. But man, I
Then
don't
you
think
would
it
be
would have been better
suffering.
if it was.
Yeah, you would be suffering from what Stephen King calls diarrhea of the typewriter.
Not on Poe's watch.
There's a phrase.
Yes, something I am quite guilty of myself. Kevin, anything for you?
I mean, I to respond to that. I think it is a great short story. It could have been interesting to a novel version. There's a lot to explore there, but it is just such a great example of like how to do a short story well that does not leave you with a lot of information. But I still felt satisfied by the end, and it all. I mean, in some ways, like it does help that if I want more, I can go back and watch the show because I think the show is a great adaptation. And yeah, TJ, I think you would really enjoy it.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I
should watch
second
it.
that.
Most of my screen time is Valorant or Elden Ring.
Of course.
Nice.
I can't say
Mostly
anything about that
Valorant right
last
now.
one.
Yeah, I see you on there.
No, yeah. Now with the DLC out, I have to keep going back into the
Yeah,
lands
I see
between.
you on there all the
So
time.
TJ sees me on Discord. So how would you
I'll
rate
see you
this
on
story
PlayStation.
out of 10?
9.
No, I was gonna say
Yeah.
9 as well. I'd say maybe just like a point for it. Maybe I want like just a little bit answered, but still, it is just so good at being in this medium.
Yeah, there's so much here to like. It's kind of hard to not give it a 10, but I do hate ambiguity.
I agree. Yeah, I'm going to give this sucker a 9.5. This is extremely well written. If you're looking how to write setting, prose, mood, like you've got your story right here. It sets things up extremely well. Minus some gripes I have with the ambiguity of some things. This is an excellent story, guys. You're well worth your time to check out. And that's one of the things we want you to do with this All Reading Count series is to convince you to go experience it, whether that would be through the Netflix series or actually reading the original stories. Hey, guess what? They're public domain. So you can read them for free whenever you want. It's one of the greatest things about public domain. And the fact that we don't do that more often because of greed really hurts. So moving on from that sad fact, we do have a bonus question, and this is separate from our normal bonus questions. This is one that you pay a one-time fee on our Patreon page, if you go to Captivate as well, where we are going to be discussing the question, if we had chosen another Poe creation to use as our focus for the episode we did instead of The Fall of the House of Usher, what would we have picked and why? So if that's something that interests you, or if you just want to donate some money to your local libraries, let us know by paying for it. Thank you very much for everything you guys do. Guys, you have a recommendation for the audience based on a different form of literature, and why do you think they should check that out?
So, my favorite novella May require some prior reading, but The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. It is amazing. It's beautiful. It really puts you in the head space of one of the more eclectic characters from his series, The King Killer Chronicles. I don't think you necessarily need to read The King Killer Chronicles to enjoy the book. So check that out. It is a novella, so it's like 3-ish times the size of like a big short story, but it's really small.
Kevin?
I'm going to recommend a literary podcast by the great LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton Reads. It's
Yeah.
it's adult reading rainbow, and it is the best thing ever. Where it's literally that. It's just him reading short stories that he handpicks himself, and he does some commentary afterwards. It is, I mean, if you're having a good or bad day, especially if you're stressed, turn it on. It is just like it'll put your mind at ease, and you get just some great, a really diverse collection of short stories read by him. LeVar Burton was one of the best humans on the planet. What else can be said? So especially if you are like want to get more into short stories, I think that's a great resource.
Yeah, not every story he picks is a winner, but at the end of the day, his love is infectious, and I have a good time listening. I agree with that as well. But my own answer would be to just do completely something separate, but keep it within short stories. Read Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Mm.
They're sets of different short stories from the perspectives of the background characters from the Mos Eisley scene in the original New Hope. It's not canon anymore because Disney got a Disney, but it's still well worth your time. Not everyone short story in there is the greatest, but you get to get insights into different alien species and how they think, and it's so much fun. As someone who loves world building, that's one thing I can definitely recommend to everyone. So, guys, thank you again for everything that you do. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. Also, as well, you can send us episode topic ideas for what you want us to cover along the way. And since you guys have got us to over 100 subscribers on YouTube, please feel free to send questions to us at systematicecology@gmail.com or our Facebook page, Priests of the Geeks, or on Discord in the episode discussions channel, where you guys just ask us questions of like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what about what's your favorite episode or something like that? That way we're compiling a special Q&A session for you based on your questions later on to be determined. So as thanks for you guys getting us there. As well, I'd like to shout out some patrons. Thank you, Aaron Hardy, Daniel Sigmund, Trip Fuller, and James Barrett. You guys are the best. Love having you guys along with us on the journey. But remember, we are all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.